It's time to put the back together for our Home Sweet Home Charmed Adventure center medallion. And we're going to start with 4 large squares of your back. So that's what I have here. And I have them, I just cut them right off the way they come off the bolt. So these 2 are right sides together and so are those. So that doesn't really matter if they're right or wrong sides facing up. Your directions will tell you to make a line from the corner so far up, depending on the size of your block. So this particular one was 5 5/8, and this is a 7-inch. Then I drew a line a 1/4 inch down from there. And the 1/4 inch down is my cutting line. So I have all of these lined up, and I'm just going to cut on that line. And then the other thing you need to cut for your center medallion is you need to cut a square and then cross cut it so you end up with 4 triangles. So what I need to do is, this is the right side of my fabric. I need to put my triangle right side to the fabric. And look at these little tips coming out. Try to get them even on both sides. It's a little bigger than it needs to be so we can trim it when it's finished. And we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch seam, and we'll do that on all 4 of these pieces. I've stitched down my corner pieces, and on 2 of them I press the seam toward the larger square, and on the other 2 I press the seam toward the smaller square. So now we need to trim them. And we made our smaller square a little bigger than it needed to be because it's just easier to trim it down when it's finished, so you can see it's a little bit larger. So all we'll do is we'll take a straight edge on your quilting ruler, line it up along your straight edge on your larger square, and then we're just going to cut off what's hanging out on the smaller one just to even it up. So we'll do this on all 4 pieces, and then we'll come back and stitch them together. My pieces are all trimmed up and ready to go. So now it's time to sew them together. So I've made sure that my seams are offset. So this seam is going toward the inside. The seam is the outside, inside and outside. So when I sew them together, when I put them right sides together, the seams are opposing. So what we'll do is we'll pin our match point here, pin the rest of it, and we'll stitch this into a 1/4 inch seam. So I have 2 of my sections sewn together, and I went ahead and pressed the seams open. So now we'll put these right sides together and pin our match points, stitch it at a 1/4 inch seam, and press that seam open. So I'm ready to layer my quilt top, my batting, my lightweight stabilizer, and my backing. So I've taken all the paper off the back of my top and given it a really good press with some starch just to stabilize it because we have a lot of bias edges. And I've cut my large piece of wool batting, and I've also cut and sewn together a couple of pieces of my lightweight cutaway stabilizer, and it will depend on what size quilt you're doing as to how many you will cut and sew together. So I'm going to take this into an area where I can use a spray adhesive, and I'm going to spray the back of my quilt top and adhere it to my batting, and then I'm going to spray the back of the batting and adhere it to my lightweight cutaway stabilizer. So we'll be right back when that's done. So I've used my temporary spray adhesive, and I've stuck my top to my batting to my lightweight cutaway stabilizer, and now I'm going to excuse me, put a water soluble thread in my needle and use my walking foot, and I'm going to quilt in a ditch right through the center, both directions. And I'm using water soluble thread because I want it to go away, And then I'll use that basting line to help me line up my back later. So we'll come back when that's finished. So here's a look at the back of my layered piece. This is the lightweight cutaway stabilizer. You can see I've stitched directly across from each other. North, south, east, and west. And here's the front. So I started in the middle, worked my way out, started in the middle, worked my way out on all 4 sections. Then I went ahead and basted around the circle. Now I'm going to start in between here, like on the corners, and baste in this seam here. This is still with the water-soluble thread. I'm stitching right in the ditch. So I'll do that on all 4 corners, and then we'll put the back on. So I've got all my basting done. I've gone ahead and started at the center out to the corners on all 4 corners, and the center out to the edges on north, south, east, and west. And it's a really good idea to check the back and be sure it's laying nice and flat, and that's the whole reason we do this, to keep these 3 layers together before we add the back. So we're ready to go ahead and add our back. This is the wrong side of my back, nicely pressed, and I'm going to take a little bit of the temporary spray adhesive and spray it on the back very lightly. So now we're going to turn it over. You might want some help to do this, but basically we're going to line up our seams with our seams. So I'm going to start with these 2 seams here. Let's see. So we'll turn this back a little bit. Like this. It's a little sticky, so. And line up those 2 seams. And then I'll turn these back, line up those 2 seams. So in theory, if this seam is lined up, this one's lined up, this one's lined up, and this one's lined up, it should be centered. Okay, so spread it out. So once I get it smoothed out, I will take another peek, and we are lined up there. We're a little off here, so I'm going to try to fix that. A little off toward the end. There we go. And let's look at this one. That one's good. And the one down here is good. So there, now we have our layers on. So now we can go back to the sewing machine and switch our water-soluble thread out to, I like to use on mine a clear thread in the needle and the bobbin, and I'm going to repeat the same steps. I'm going to do my north, south, east, and west in the ditch, and then I'll turn it over and check it and make sure it's pretty much lined up, and then I'll do my diagonal seams. So I've just stitched my north, south, east, and west, and it pretty much landed right on my seam line, which is what I wanted. It's a tiny bit off here, but you're not going to notice that when you get your quilting done. So these dents here are really not stitched up, but those are the corner ones. It's just falling into the where it was stitched previously. So now, there's a look at the front. I will again start in the center, work my way to each corner, and then we'll come back. So I just stitched my 4 corners, and I'm going to turn it over, take a look. So that's what we have so far. So this is great. So now we can go ahead and finish the machine quilting here, now that we have all of our layers cemented together. And we'll just continue in the ditch down each seam, and always starting from the center and working your way out. So I've got all my layers quilted together, and there's a little poof here in the middle that we'll take care of at the end when we put our applique over the center, but you can't even see the seam, so it's kind of cool. And here's a look at the front. So now we're ready to send our designs to the embroidery machine and get quilting on our center of our medallion.